2 published novels and a recipient of 2 Canada Council for the Arts Awards for fiction. Jean is wondering what to do with 4 completed novels sitting on her computer. 2 are about online dating. 1 is about domination and submission. And in the most recent one, the curator of a political art museum discovers that the cure for narcissism is abstract expression. One of the DIY movement in the 80s and 90s, Jean would like to apologize for having encouraged everyone to form a band and write a novel. Fortunately for Jean, she isn't attached to the idea of earning a living in, quote-unquote, the arts. And at the same time, she recognizes that she played a role in screwing things up for a lot of people. After a recent failure to sell vintage clothing on eBay, Jean used promo codes to open 3 shops on Etsy. That isn't going well either. Soon she'll get it together to return to querying their agents, even though she isn't sure that having a agent will work any better than selling old clothes online for 2,000% more than she paid for them. Please welcome Jean Smith.
I'm not sure what kind of mood I was in when I wrote that intro. I thought it was going to be a print sort of printed intro. Anyway, I did sell some items on Etsy. Sold some vintage shoes and Levi's red tag jean jacket. This is recent. This is like today. So that is now officially going well. I still do pull it off. Yeah, I can work with it. It's the fucking 80s. Recognize it when I was there. So as Kevin said, this is an excerpt from the Black Rock Museum of Political Art. It's called Odell's Bath. Odell is actually a minor character. She is the mother of the narcissist who is, in fact, in the throes of being cured of his narcissism by the museum curator. Now, I read somewhere in my research of how to write a novel that might actually sell that women would like to have their protagonist, their female protagonist, actually do something admirable rather than, whining about whatever relationship they just screwed up recently. So I decided to have her cure narcissism, which in fact is an incurable personality disorder, which I've become completely fascinated with and by, those being 2 separate things, I realize. And I have researched it quite extensively, mostly through online dating, which I do seem to either attract narcissists or I seek them out to, I believe, work through whatever residual childhood, I don't know. But I've analyzed, I come home from the date and I write about, I'm not doing any online dating, I haven't touched this stuff for a couple of years, but anyway, I've met a lot of narcissists and it's a shocking and relevant and extremely upsetting personality disorder, the hallmark symptom of which is the lack of empathy. So narcissists, in fact, cannot put themselves in anyone else's shoes, which is really quite sad once you get over being incredibly fucking angry about that. If you're in a relationship or one or both of your parents are narcissists. Water. So my protagonist is in this system of belief through her own uncanny ability to interpret abstract expressionist paintings. She in fact views it as a language, much like English or jazz or anything else. She just looks at it completely non-figurative painting and can read the emotional overtones and nuances that the painter was either having at the time of its creation or trying to project through the artwork. And so she comes in contact with this narcissist, and they begin a sort of a process of painting and naming and working through some of his issues towards curing him. But at some point I wanted to take a stab at trying to address why someone might become a narcissist. In what I did research, it could be some kind of childhood trauma, and it really is a disconnect in the brain that it is quite a severe sort of set of circumstances to be utterly selfish and attention-seeking in this extreme sort of way. Anyway, I gave him a mother and sort of pointed some of the blame in her direction, which I guess is not entirely politically correct, but there it goes. So this is Odell, his mother, Odell's Bath. She grew up in New Brunswick on a potato farm in the 30s, and a rather large family living in squalor and poverty. Their cast iron clawfoot tub, raised up on bricks to make room for the fire beneath it. After supper, the bath regime began, with Odell's father climbing in first to soak for the better part of an hour. After which, when her mother was alive, she'd be next, but she tended to make it quick. After her, the boys one at a time. Finally, it was Odell's turn. Frequently, she had to chop more kindling to stoke the fire and wait until the water warmed up again. She pulled the sash of her pink chenille bathrobe tighter and swung the axe more accurately than either of her brothers, splitting wood like she was slicing bread. Truly alone, she sat on her thinking rock, poking embers, vowing that one day she'd take baths twice as long as her father's and soak in bubbles until the cows came home. When she had a child, she'd spoil it. It could eat cake all day long for all she cared. Odell shifted the wood with the twisted iron rod so familiar in her right hand that it was invisible to her. All week long, the iron rod hung beside the leather strap in the shed next to the soap until bath night, when individually they held it like a medieval weapon, jabbing it into the heart of the fire as heat flushed their faces, and alone they all allowed themselves to imagine episodes of liberation and even retribution as they prepared to bathe their scrawny hillbilly bodies in the murky water beside an unnamed stone on which the soap sat. Unnamed by everyone except Odell, it was her thinking rock, although she'd never said it out loud to anyone except herself. It was here that the term "run through with it all," "run through with it all," played over and over in her head, and she blamed the rock for making her think it. This was what happened when she sat on her thinking rock. It made her think awful things about her father. She blamed the rock for putting things into her head, and she thought it best to say them, to let them out, rather than save them in her head, fearing that she might blurt out, "Run through and all," instead of "Please pass the potatoes." At dinner, Odell kept her small bottle of bubble bath in the pocket of her chenille robe. As she dribbled it across the dirty water, she repeated her chant, "Run through with it all." Naked, 1 foot on her thinking rock, she used the soot-blackened poker to agitate the water, to make the bubbles, and she laughed at how she must look, the real Odell. And she added to her chant, "If all eyes were on me now, if all The saving grace of her otherwise woefully lacking existence was that her father was not a man of God. Unlike her schoolmates traipsing off to church, Sundays were her own, not to run through fields of buttercups, but to catch up on chores. Odell sometimes found herself glancing skyward while she was squeezing dirty water out of a mop, thanking God that her father was not religious, thus cracking herself up enough that she twigged on to how humor worked. It split apart the dark tendrils tightening in her gut and around her heart, soothing her like a slug of moonshine, but laughter didn't burn and make her cough. Odell tried to find external sources to make herself laugh, to reduce the internal grumbling in what she knew was not her soul, nor was she hungry, unless what she felt could be called a hunger to express herself. If she laughed or cried, her father got angry. He was a man who was staunchly confused about most things, but in his role as the head of the household, he felt compelled to have strong opinions. Anger was the only emotion he let his family see. He pontificated wildly, combining nuances of opposing stances, putting on a show, all bluster. Odell tried to follow his logic, but when she was 9, she heard the word irrational uttered by her mother while they were going through the remnant bin at Hester's dry goods store. Irrational. Irrational. She made the word her own. By the time she left the farm at 16, Odell had eaten enough green beans to last her a lifetime. Emancipation from what she regarded as emotional tyranny came by way of the SMT Eastern bus line, and her overwhelming determination to never again eat anything green. Thank you.
Exceptional once again. Thanks, Jean. How are you guys doing? Do you guys want to get another drink or use the bathroom? I'm going to suggest taking a 10-minute break.